Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome back to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today we sit down with Mr. John Pruitt. John is the owner at East to West Safety Plus on-site safety training, and we have an awesome conversation this week about your safety training program, maybe the do's and don'ts of running an effective program within your company. I think you're really going to love this conversation. He boils it down to some really easy to digest and implement steps and thoughts that you can plug into what you're doing every day for your business. So enjoy this episode. Good morning, John. It's great to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, man, thanks. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, obviously, you are the guru of safety, or at least that's what I'm going to call you. So
I'll take it.
Nice. It's such an important part of construction. And obviously, it's important. I mean, you hear the term safety first all the time, but it really is the most important thing is that these employees and these workers are able to get back home to their loved ones at night. And so from your perspective, what do you think is the reason that so many companies seem to struggle with keeping that top of mind a little bit more regularly?
Well, it's kind of a hard thing to deal with there because there's a huge disconnect between the office, the guys on site. There's always something different. There's always a miscommunication or a different vision. I'll put it that way. And, an office guy will say one thing, want to do something. The guys on the site, let's just get that job done, right? Then there's a huge gap there, right? And that's what I think needs to get filled big time.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the office is worried about compliance. They have documentation of things that they have to have organized and ready to make sure that they can validate that you're operating in a safe manner, right? Following all the protocols. The field, like you said, it's got to hurry. We're behind the weather. We've had, we're waiting for this other sub, or we got another sub on our heels. We got to hurry. And so sometimes those corners seem to get cut when it comes to the field. So what do you do in the field to help them be more mindful of that instead of trying to rush past those things that are so important?
So for us, we're primarily on-site training, right? So for me, I get both sides. On the sales side, I get a chance to go in, talk to the office, talk to their safety guy, talk to whoever I can who handles a lot of what they do in the field. But then where most of my training is, and the other part of our sales is out in the field itself on that actual site. So I get that weird opportunity to see the inside and the outside to really see what's mixing between the two, I mean, I can watch commercials all day long and them talk about being the best safety guys and safety's paramount. And I go into a job site and I'm like, dude, am I getting pranked right now? Because this is some nonsense that I'm seeing out here. So someone's disconnected. Either they're just saying what they want people to hear, or the people on the site, just that importance is not there for them, right? So it's one of the two that goes on to that. But I do get to see both sides. And it's really interesting when I go to a job site from the office where I was just at. I'm like, someone's not telling the full story here.
Yeah, two different companies running here, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a big difference.
Interesting. So in the office, the key is visibility to what's going on in the field, and then the field has to report that back. I mean, obviously technology is a big part of this, but what other things or what other methods do companies use to get that visibility in the office or what's going on at boots on the ground?
Well, I think that's the key question. I think that's the hardest part between everybody and what's got going on, With the way the economy's been, things have been tight. They're not having those 2 or 3 safety guys that can travel around to all the job sites anymore, right? So they might try to lay on some sort of platform, to check the boxes, to go through our daily checklist, to have those little 5-minute tailgates or whatever it might be. But the office, on the other hand, is a little bit different. I mean, they'll talk one thing, and they do believe that because, you know, I mean, the safety ratings mean a lot. I know up north, they mean an awful lot for people even delivering equipment into places. Hey, your safety ranking better be somewhere else. So they took safety extremely serious when it comes to that there. But between that and what goes on to the field there, it's like, it's either a lot of words or it's,
Yeah.
you got some guys who don't even care that you're the boss. I mean, I don't know, one of the two's happening there. So,
interesting.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to find a gap of what is it. I think there's a bunch of little things that can be done there, but, you know, nothing beats somebody coming to the job site to put eyes on stuff. You know what I mean? Say, hey, just so you know, we're close on this. This is way off. We got to fix this. Get harness on that guy, right? Whatever it might be, is a big difference from someone there that you have to listen to that's objective to the whole situation there. You know.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. It makes me think software or technology, although often the answer, the right answer to fill a lot of those gaps, it's definitely not the only answer. And actually that thing that could be the crutch also could be part of the problem too, right? If you don't have that on-site visibility.
Well, yeah, that's true. So if you can figure out how to manage that on-site visibility through actual live video, actual footage, because what I've seen way too many times, the office is making us do all this extra paperwork, or we got to have this app now. We got to fill this out every day, and I got to check this box, and I got to do this. And I will see him sit in that car with his radio on. Everything's awesome. Everything's awesome. Everything's great. Everything's awesome. Everything's great. And then bam, hit send, and that goes back to the office. Well, what got accomplished there? Boxes got checked. Nothing else was done, right? You know, so it's, again, that's the problem that comes into that. So it's like, you know, if you can't have people, everyone's, you know, tightening their belts up when it comes to finances with things. So they don't have all those guys that can run around. So I think an aspect of having that stuff to be able to do it, but what's the way to actually touch base there? Is it that live video? Is it that? Because again, I can take a bunch of pictures when I tell everyone to put harnesses on and, you know, everyone scoot out the way so everything looks perfect and pretty. I don't even have to leave my truck to make my reports look like I'm the best safety guy in the whole world, or the safety guy on site following everything.
Yeah, brilliant. But conversely, to your point, and I think this is what we're saying, you could have a complete safe job site in every way, shape, and form, but in the absence of documentation, you might still get fined.
Exactly.
Right?
So it goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
You know, so if you don't have that documentation, or, you know, and you are the best out there, and I've ran across plenty of those guys, you know, a lot of smaller companies, and it's, a lot of the owners are guys in the field, you know, doing stuff too. And their point is, look, we need our guys to go home the way they came here today, man. I mean, we're friends, you know, we want to get the job done. We want to make some money. I want everybody to be safe, but come the end of the day with it, you know, man, I'm not buying an app. I'm not doing this. I'm not, you know, having an inspector come out on my behalf and to call them out there to do that. But if something does happen, it's like, well, where's your documentation for any of that? All right. So if they're on the backside of what we were just talking about.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like there's really a kind of a balance of tech or apps, and then also a culture of safety that we've really got to meld together and try and utilize, you know, put a foot on both sides of that fence so that you're covered, right?
Because the great part about all the apps and everything too, when it comes to that, is it also provides those boxes in front of them that they didn't even think about, you know, which is good. Yeah. You know, I mean, you get a smaller business, right? And they're just there to do some work, man. I got a small company. We're just trying to make things. I got some friends working for me. We're just trying to create a living. That's great. But if there's a bunch of boxes you don't know, the game changer is going to be when OSHA steps onto that job site, or one of those guys get hurt and it gets investigated and they start looking into everything. That's the game changer. So having something like that where you have all those boxes is just as good, but also just as bad as the guy who's going to sit in his truck and just check off everything that morning, right?
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. I mean, having that, I think, is a big key thing to have.
So culturally, and for you, I mean, you're a trainer. You know, we were talking before we hit record, you know, you learn by doing, and I'm the same way. I mean, I could read 100 books, but if I don't take notes and apply and have some goals or try and implement some of what I'm consuming, it just goes in one ear and eventually out the other. Even if I think about it for a little while, I remember, there was something about that thing, you know, I may recall lightly, but to actually retain and commit that to memory and to make it a part of my daily routine, I got to have hands-on experience. And I think a lot of construction guys are probably the same way. Wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, I think most of them are, because it comes into the same aspect of probably the biggest phrase that I hear almost every single day. I've been doing this for 25 years, man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you and I both, I see the smile on your face, right? We know that is great because you got experience, but it's horrible because you might be in a box and you think you know everything about everything, right? Or you've been doing things a certain way. Maybe you just haven't got killed yet. So you might want to say,
right.
There's a difference in between the two there, and merging those two together is where you got to kind of find that middle ground with that. But that's what's said all the time, It's like, okay, well, how come you don't even have a harness on? How come you're not even buckling your seatbelt? This is 101, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've been doing this for all these years. It's like, okay, but not right. That's an issue. You don't think it's an issue. And here's the biggest thing we were talking about, one of the disconnects between the field and the office. They don't think nothing of it. I'm safe. I've never gotten hurt. I've been doing this for 25 years. It's been great. Well, just because you don't have a harness on and OSHA comes out there on something absolutely simple as that, which should be common sense, what's your company going to think when they're getting that $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 fine on that, right? Someone might not be getting invited to the Christmas party after that, if you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
But that's a big difference, right? Oh, I'm safe. I know what I'm doing. Okay, great. He's safe. He's know what he's doing. They got to pay the bills. You're not paying that fine, right? So it's one of those things that you need to know more about what's going on in that field there, right? And that's what kind of goes into the difference in how I try to do my trainings for those guys, like I would somebody brand new, so.
That's a great point. Just because you've avoided dying from those stupid things you've been doing for 25 years doesn't mean you should keep doing them, right?
Look, I had this guy on this, we were doing an inspection on this big company down here, and we were passing between one building to another building. On the outside of it, they had this guy that was up there in like a 45-foot man lift, and he was doing some work on the big overhead roll-up door. Had his harness on, everything looked great. He was a subcontractor. We weren't even dealing with him. So we go into the other building. It's about lunchtime at this point in time. We come back out. I look up just, because I see the basket up there. My man's got his shirt off, his harness off, sitting on a cooler eating a sandwich, 45 feet up in the air.
Wow.
I was like, hey, man, none of my business, but you might want to put your harness on, probably put that shirt back on, you know what I mean? He's like, man, what are you talking about? It's lunchtime. And that was his full belief. It was lunch. He was off the clock at that point in time, because gravity stops at 12 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
But it was one of those things I was like, but that was his true thought. And that's what was a little bit scary. He didn't quite look like a guy who's been around forever, but you can tell he's been in the business. He was operating the equipment, he's had some experience. But to have that concept and that thought process, dude, what would the office have thought about that on the inside? What do you mean you're taking your harness and your shirt off, eating a sandwich up in here just because it's lunchtime and you thought that was okay?
Yeah.
I had another guy in training that didn't think he had to put his harness on because it was just training. It wasn't actually on a job site. It's like, well, this isn't just about compliance. It's also about safety, right? That's kind of where those two meet. Yeah, that's where you got to meet us at with this. But in his mind, it's just safety training. It's just training, to get my card. I don't have to have this on at that point in time. And it's like, man, really? You should have that conversation with your boss, see what he thinks about that, because you might have a different outcome at the end of the day.
Well, it's like getting your driver's license when you're 16 years old. Most of us don't drive like we did during driver's ed, driver's training or trying to pass the test, right? Now I got my license, I can do what I want. Well,
right,
that's just not the case, right?
No. So it goes everything from just because I really try to look at the both sides, because I think, again, there's that big difference. I look at the safety aspect for the guys on the site. It's like, look, man, you guys need to go home the way you came to work, right? You got people depending on you. You got family who love you. Right? Don't take that as in being cocky as, I've been doing this for years and, nothing's ever happened to me. Like, take that extra step, when it comes to that. From the office side of it, looking as like, well, we want to check these boxes because I don't want to get fined. I don't want penalties. I don't want to have that mark on my record, right? I don't want all those things to go on with it. Again, it's two different stories that are fighting one another there. And that coming together is what's going to make the game changer for people out there in the field.
Well, and even, and I spent 10 years in the field. So I've done all the hard labor. I did all the things to, work on my back and, make sure I have the aches and pains that I'll be 50 this year. And my body's not the same as when I was 20. And so it doesn't respond the same when I'm working. It doesn't, react the same. If I do get hurt, I don't heal nearly as quickly either. So, there's all these other things besides, even if you do something where you make a mistake and you weren't safe and you do get hurt, it costs you a lot more. It takes you longer. It's, the stakes are higher. I've got kids, grandkids. I got a lot of people counting on me to come home tonight. So
sure,
we owe it to ourselves as individuals and to our families, especially, to make sure that we're making good decisions so that we can come home safely at night and take care of those loved ones that we're doing the work for, right? To provide for.
It's funny you say that, because that's actually part of the training that I actually dive into a little bit more probably than most people do about that. And we just talk about it. We have that conversation a little bit about it, from experience and numbers I've had from working in the rental industry to, seeing hard numbers with that to that. I was like, 3 points of contact. That's a simple conversation everyone should have. Everyone still jumps on and off that equipment like it's a Dukes of Hazzard sliding across the hood of the car, right? It's like, but that's the thing. I go into that saying, look, I'm almost 50 years old, man. I'm not recovering in 24, 48 hours anymore, man. This is going to take a while. I was like, so you try to take that in your aspect for you and your crew. Can you afford to have a man down for 6 weeks, 2-3 months, right? Does the office want to pay for someone sitting at home for that just because they didn't climb that ladder properly? They didn't get in and out of that piece of equipment over something very simple and silly? That hurts you and your family, and it hurts that office and puts everyone behind the 8 ball at that point in time.
Yeah. And even, heaven forbid, some of these injuries or these severe accidents result in a death. But we've had folks on the podcast before talking about safety and talking about all those same types of things. And you want to impact a company culturally, if somebody gets hurt or heaven forbid dies, doing this work, man, you're really impacting everything about that company. And that's, it's just not, nobody wins when somebody gets hurt or somebody gets killed, especially. It's bad all the way around. So we owe it to ourselves, our teams, our families, and everybody involved to operate safely. Nothing's getting something done a little earlier or on time or ahead of schedule is not worth anybody getting hurt over.
It's not. And when you really prepare, and these little choices and decisions, man, they don't take long. You know what I mean? It's a couple decisions I can choose to do. Did it take longer using 3 points of contact opposed to just jumping off something, right? What, a half a second? But the outcome from that is just huge, and it affects the family, it affects them, it affects that company, and that needs to all come to the same meeting point sometime.
Yeah, and I imagine, we were talking also, obviously you could probably write books upon books upon books, just sharing stories of some of these things that you've seen and experienced. What are some of the things that come to mind where you realize, man, this is a real problem. This is something that isn't just this company or that, but I seem to see this recurring theme quite a bit. What are those common things that you run into?
So one of the biggest things that I see out there right now is, I don't need it until I need it, man. I've been doing this for years,
okay.
Right? I don't see OSHA. I don't see this. I don't need to pay for that, right? I've been operating this for so long. It's like, okay, well, it's not necessarily about the operation part for you. It's about making sure you know everything you need to know for sure, the proper stuff, right? But it's also to make sure that you're covered on the back end of it for the office sake, right? For your sake, to make sure everybody's in compliance on what they need to do. We have down here, a bunch of lumber yards, like a bunch of places do down here. And there's multiple ones around here that's owned by the same company that I won't say who, obviously, but I stopped in there one time, bunch of guys driving around with forklifts in the parking lot, right? But I see all these women and children around because they're parking in the same parking lot these guys are running around. It was a little hectic, right? So I just stopped in, went to go meet the owner, drop him off a card, say, hey, here's one of my cards, we'd like to help you guys out to make sure you're in compliance. You guys good to go, and then here's where terminology comes into it a little bit too, to say, hey, I can provide forklift training for your guys to make sure they're up to date and good to go. But he took that as, my guys have been doing this for years. I've had the same crew. We've never had incident. They don't need training on this. And some people take offense to that word training. So, well, training might mean, hey, might not be kicking you a lot of new information, but we're going to cover a lot of boxes that you need to know, right? The office has to do, right? Get into compliance, be good to go with that. So he proceeded to tell me, over and over again that I don't need this, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's awesome. I was like, hey, I just want to make sure, just in case for your sake, for your guy's sake, for OSHA's sake, that you were good to go. And my guy looked at me and said, man, I don't believe in OSHA. I was like, it's not Santa Claus. It's like, look, OSHA believes in you. He's going to be there all the time, right? Whether you think it is or not.
Yes.
Whether you think he's going to come in to investigate you, or it's after the fact if something happens and someone gets injured and there's, an investigation or something goes on. It's like, just don't think because you don't see him running up around your business that's not the case. But yeah, my guy told me flat out he didn't believe in OSHA. And I was like, it's just not a name. There's a lot to it, right? So
yeah, it's a concept. It stands for the way that you operate your business, even if you don't agree. It's like, I don't agree in the IRS. Well, you still owe your taxes, right? Man.
I don't believe in them.
They don't care whether you believe in them or not.
Exactly.
You gotta pay.
but and that goes back to your question, though. That's kind of the big thing that we're dealing with. You got that disconnect between those people and even the offices that believe that. But that disconnect can also come from the actual words that you're using sometimes too. They're like, training, I've been doing this, I don't need training. Well, first off, you need to have your bases covered, right? It has to be done every so often, right? You have to have your documentation. You have to have this stuff. So no, there's a technical side to it, not just being hey, you're great at lifting stuff up and moving it around. That's awesome. That's a benefit from it all. But that's not all that there is to it, right? There's that backside of it that affects the office, it affects you and everyone else.
Yeah, and I think, maybe, I know we're bumping up against time here, and I'd love to have you back on next week and have a little bit more deeper dive on maybe some of the training and some of the more specific things, but maybe this is a really good note to end on. So, I'm just sensing that there is an issue in some cases where the leadership of these companies from the top down, they don't believe in OSHA, or they're not worried about it. They think that they've got this handled because they've never had a problem. How important is a top-down leadership culture building around safety that some of these companies might be still missing out on?
Well, I think it's huge. And I think it does come down from the top to the bottom with it, because you can find those supervisors, you can find those actual guys who are like, look, I've been injured before. I want the training. I want to be up to date. I want to wear that harness. I buckle up. I do what I'm supposed to do, because they have been laid up in that hospital bed for a while. All right. But then you get a lot of guys who are like, dude, just like you talked about before, we got to get this job done, right? We got to do this. We're cutting a little corner here, but we've done it a million times, whatever that might be. That's the deal breaker right there. That's the thing that's different. And if you can find that gap in between there, like we talked about, video is usually, if you can't have a guy that can be out there and be that non-biased guy that can say, hey, this is wrong, you have to fix this, we have to do this properly. Well, you have to figure that out some other way, because you will have good guys out there who are doing it the proper way. There's a lot of them out there that want to do that and be safe and go home, because they know that job is not worth them being in a wheelchair, right? They're not providing for their family if they don't do that. So that's great. But it's that in between there, you got to just make sure that, is it that video? Is it that recording? Is it that quick live stream from your supervisor walking around the job for 10 minutes a day to somebody else in there? But that page has got to be, everyone's got to be on that same page.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we can all relate to this. I mean, I saw this coming into work this morning. There was a garbage truck driving towards my office, and they were picking up the cans as they were going. And there were 3 or 4 cars behind them, and I was one of them. And I had to get here to record this podcast. I don't want to be late. So I'm worried about, hey, is this person going to pull around the garbage truck and let us go here or not? And so, I'm anxious and antsy to get pulled around. Well, eventually we ended up in a school zone, and then there's a crosswalk. And so, if I was negligent and wasn't paying attention to the signs around me, the flashing, the blinking, the crosswalks, the crosswalk person dressed in, fluorescent yellow with the lights flashing on her as she's, walking these kids across the street, there could have been an accident or something horrible.
Sure.
It's because if I have a lapse in judgment because of this garbage truck and these other drivers that I don't think are being, offensively driving in order to not, cause this big pileup of traffic, slow down, something bad could happen. So those flashing warning lights, I mean, maybe it is the video, maybe it is the checkbox, maybe it is the thing that I now have to do to be in compliance that keeps it top of mind, that reminds me, oh yeah, that's right, we really ought to be doing this. Oh, I'm supposed to be doing that. We all need those mental checklists, if not physical checklists in life. And so I think just having the right attitude and approach towards looking at those correctly as a positive reinforcement of what we really ought to be doing, because it is the right thing to do, not just because we're required to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to think of your family first. That's most important. Your health, your family, that's it. Everything else is bonuses, right from that. So, checking boxes, you got to get out of that mentality and say, hey, what am I doing that's going to make me happier tonight, this weekend, where I'm not injured, I'm not hurt, and we can keep everything moving, status quo the way it should be as far as being happy with everything.
That's beautiful. That's a great thought to end on. Will, anything else you want to part the audience with so they can come away with a takeaway from our conversation today?
I think probably the biggest thing in taking away from this little aspect we were talking about is don't take offense to everything, right? The office, the company has got a duty for, OSHA's sake, for their sake, for insurance sake, for making sure you guys are safe out in the field, opposed to thinking, here we go again, right? Sometimes you just got to hey, let me take whatever I can out of this and improve myself and my way of life for me and my family.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, great to have you on, John. Lots of fun to get to know you.
I appreciate it.
Can't wait to have another conversation and catch up again even down the road as well.
Definitely, man. I appreciate it. Look forward to it.
All right. Thank you. Catch you later.
All right, bud. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.